Hey, how's it going? Alex?
Hello. What's going on?
Not too much. I'm in Virginia this weekend.
You're just all over the place.
Yeah, it's all connected to the impending wedding. Last weekend I had some time to spend with my fiance's parents and my parents, and this weekend I'm hanging out with one of my oldest and dearest friends who's officiating the wedding. Hey, how's it going?
Hi, I'm gonna I can't get my beats to connect for some reason, and there's so many loud children here, so I'm going to largely stay muted. But wanted to stop and say hi to everyone. How are you
Hello.
all?
Hello.
How's,
Hi,
how's it
Tim.
going, Stacy?
Good, good. Sunday morning, so the children are playing hide and seek. It is the quietest game. How long it lasts. But I got this one. I'm gonna go to all the meetings today, so I got another one in like 20
Oh,
minutes. I'm just gonna stick around for demos and then
cool.
out. But just curious to see how things are going. Be here to support y'all if you need anything.
How's it going, Tim?
Oh, it's going pretty well. Some last minute Git stuff, but it's all good.
That's an extremely professional thing to happen. I assure you it happens every day in my real job. It's like, that's a merge.
Yeah.
Everything that happened this week will happen to all of you at some point.
Yeah.
Many times in the course of your careers.
Yeah.
I believe it. No, it's been a really instructive first week, I feel like. Lots of new experiences.
How's it going, Shireen?
Going well. I had my fair share of Git issues yesterday. I just wanted to like Git revert, go back to a previous commit. I couldn't figure it out.
It can be pretty rough.
It was a
you're-
challenge for me, but Rebecca figured it out. Praise her, thank her. Like I'm so glad. Glad I have a teammate.
That is exactly how we want y'all to feel. So we've all seen that Manjuri is going to be taking care of her health and not able, therefore, to continue with us. But y'all will have a new collaborator named Emily, and she's not able to join this meeting. I figured I would just keep this one on the schedule since we're kind of real close to it when we had to process that sort of change up. But over the course of the next week, I'm going to see if this is a good recurring time for her or if we can make something else work. Either way, we'll obviously keep going, but we might need to change the schedule around just to accommodate her. So that being said, we are all here who's going to be here today. So we should probably get started. And Stacy, we are in fact recording, and I think Andy's in charge of those and has been doing an amazing job so far of getting these recordings up. So we really appreciate you for that one, Andy.
Yeah, no problem.
And for many things, you've been doing a lot of the coordinating work and the actual like email logistics. So thank you very much.
No problem.
Cool. So let's see here. What is on the agenda for today? Demos are up first, I believe. And ordinarily we would have you present in pairs, but obviously it's not going to be how it goes today. So, but we do have one team of two here. Do you all want to go first, or well, is it? I can't remember what the groupings were for this week. Tim, are you by yourself today?
Yes.
Okay. Would you like to go first by yourself, or Shireen and Rebecca? Would you like to go?
I can go first, especially since I just did like the component merge, so I can show them like what I did.
Awesome. If you want to go ahead and share your screen and show us like what that looks like running on your local box, that'd be super cool if that's something you are comfortable doing.
Yeah, totally. Let me just make sure everything is reasonable on the old desktop. Cool. So just desktop. Cool. Can you see things, people?
I can.
Yeah. We can
great.
see a list of nonsense strings.
Cool. Yeah, so should I show the code or just the browser?
Let's start with the code.
Oh, cool. So Yeah, so we on issue 2, I believe, was adding React router DOM to the dependencies, and then using that to create just a navigation with 2 links. And so I did that, and I put the browser router inside the main app function, just using browser router routes and route. And yeah, I think that's fairly straightforward. Yeah, the path that we used for the main list was just like the home path. And then the add item component, we called add item as the path, which seemed reasonable enough. And then from there, we can look at the individual components. So the list, or no, I guess the navigation would be probably the way to look at it. And so the navigation is just, yeah, a component that utilizes the React router DOM nav link component, which has this cool functionality where it has an is active like Boolean value built into it. And whenever that's active, it automatically adds the active class to that link. And so, yeah, we use this little kind of inline function, which is what they used in the documentation, to just make the link bold if it's active. And yeah,
Cool.
I think that's fairly straightforward. If anyone has any questions about that, I'm happy to.
You want to demo it working in the browser so we can visually see it too?
Totally. Yeah, so here's the browser. And so, yeah, I combined the 2 components from both of our pull requests here. So you can see the links down here, and yeah, you can just switch between them and it just works.
TM.
Yeah.
This is fantastic. I love that this latest version added in that like active feature, because it's really great for accessibility, and it's just something that we all do anyway, something that we probably would have built anyway, and now we just don't have to. So it's fantastic. I love it.
That's great.
Totally. Yeah, like I've built this using my own like React state and like toggling it with like some sort of handler, but this is so much more straightforward, I think. And then yeah, the individual links components. So I combined our 2 issues. So I basically just took all of the logic from issue number 1 and put it in here, and then added the navigation component. And that's about it.
Awesome.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Great work.
Yeah, thanks so much. It was a great demo too.
Yeah.
Cool.
I just realized, Andy, that I had you scheduled for demos, and then I started doing it just like, and I think that was mainly because I realized we hadn't done demos, and I was like, I should probably show how this.
No, I
happens.
appreciate. Yeah, I think this is going well. If you don't mind.
Yeah,
You
no
can go
worries.
ahead
I
and
just, if you don't mind doing issues later, that's a small housekeeping note for everyone. I wasn't supposed to do this, but then I just started to. So sorry about that. I didn't mean to steal your thunder there. And before I ask Shireen and Rebecca to go, I also realized that I started right into this without we didn't do the like, I asked how everyone was doing except Rebecca, and now I feel really bad. How are you doing, Rebecca?
Hi, I'm well. Thank you for asking. I'm excited to see our tickets come together. Shireen and I feel like had an adventurous week, like with Git, and also with just like the Firebase and Firestore documentation. Definitely took us a while to parse at the beginning of the week. So it's very satisfying right now to see it all coming together.
It's a great skill, learning how to get into documentation and like to parse it, because not all documentation is well written. It's a great motivator for you as a developer to document your features really well too. It's like when you have to use a lot of this stuff and figure out like what they're trying to tell you, it's you realize how bad technical writing can sometimes be. But so anyway, do you 2 want to go ahead and present and demo? And Tim, you can feel free to stop sharing at this point.
Yeah, how's that work? Okay.
So Tim literally, like a rock star, just merged these components a moment ago. So I have not pulled down like the new main onto my local yet.
You can go from your branch. That's totally okay.
Okay, cool. I can, I'm happy to pull that up, and I can show you the functionality of ours. And yeah, it looks really nice now in the components that Tim built, but I can share mine for, you can see our little button do its thing. Okay, is this good?
I can see it. Can anyone not see it?
Cool. So, yes, for our show data function, which is what Tim put in like the list page for us, we have a little bit of state to keep track of the docs that we're pulling from our database. And then this is pretty much straight from the documentation for taking a snapshot of the database and saving those docs to our state with the setter. So we just returned a little UL here with a mapping statement. Tim also caught this for us. We had forgotten our key. I feel like that's a React thing that I often miss. So we just threw the doc ID in there, which I think is a super appropriate key. And for displaying it, we also did the doc ID. We were having a hard time like accessing like the sample data that we were sending through the actual like input. But we felt that the ID definitely showed that we were writing to and like accessing the database. So in the future, we will figure out that kind of like directory structure and how to get like from the object into the value that we want to access. But this is how we have her for now. And then in the add data function that we built, which is in like the add item page that they put together for nav, we have a little handle click function that will prevent the default, and then send. We went with bread because who isn't always buying bread? And it'll send bread onto your list. And we have a little console log just to check, a little error catcher. And we put together kind of just like some boilerplate HTML that I'm sure we'll revisit, but the heart of the matter is our little button, and that will handle the click for us and send our data. So I should be able to show you guys that. These are some that we've already sent while we were developing, and they show up when you give her a click. Love to see it.
What happens if you go into Firebase and then delete some of those items?
I can actually tell you from experience that it will delete all of them in the browser, which was a good thing for what I needed, because when I was developing the other day, I got the handle click function caught in a loop and sent 2,000 pieces of data, like bread 2,000 times before I was able to close it. So then when I opened it in the browser, the way that the map function is working, the new data is showing up at the bottom of the list. And with 2,000 pieces of data, that was very hard to see. You had to scroll quite a bit. But if you go to Firestore, you can directly manipulate. I mean, I can do it now, but you can directly manipulate the data that shows up on the app.
This is great. Way to keep it like in scope. And like, I love how you're like, we're just doing the IDs right now because we just need to confirm that we can read and write. And we're just doing some really simple HTML. We're not getting deeper into it. That's like being able to keep it in scope. Like that's a really strong skill to have. So great work.
Thank you. Yeah. So if I like, for instance, just deleted this whole collection, I know that this is okay because I did it before and I know that our handler works. So it's going to create a new collection upon clicking. She's all gone.
Beautiful. That's great.
Yeah.
Nice work, team.
Awesome. Yeah, that was a great demo. Thank you very much for doing that. And I love the way that you focused on just hitting the acceptance criteria. There's a lot of stuff that we're going to be like, we're going to build part of this, and then we're going to focus on another part later, or like rip up something that was like in boilerplate. And so like, I love that you did exactly what we were looking for in the ticket. That's great work, and excellent demo skills as well. Y'all are naturals. I appreciate
Yes.
this about you.
Woo.
We
All right,
went,
I'm bouncing. Oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say that like we went back and forth on having like an input to like control like what you were sending to the list. And then we were like, no, it just says a button, like a button it is.
Excellent. I love that. Excellent work. Because that's like the natural response. It's like, oh, we're creating a list. So we want an input and we want to render that. And it's like, by that point, you've created most of the app in a way, and it just spirals really fast. So excellent work keeping it in scope. I'm going to bounce for another team meeting, but I do want to say, as you know, Collab Lab isn't just about writing code, it's about learning collaboration skills and teamwork skills and software development. And I think you're experiencing something really unique with the loss of a teammate and the addition of a new one, because when you get into an actual role as an engineer, your teams will change. People will move on to other things, you'll get new people. And it's a really important skill to have as an engineer, to be able to onboard people in a really inclusive, exciting way that makes them feel like they're part of a team. So you're getting to experience a whole extra layer of being on an engineering team that you might not have got to experience with just a very traditional Collab Lab team. So use it to learn from it, because these are the types of experiences that you'll talk about in interviews. Like, tell me about a time you helped onboard somebody to a new team. What were some things you did to make them feel included and get them up to speed? So every time you're going through these things at Collab Lab, sort of take these stories and store them somewhere in your story bank, because they're going to be really great experiences to pull from when you have to talk about the ways you've worked on a team. Also, like things like you've got the database structured a specific way right now. So note the way it's structured and why you structured it that way. And if you ever have to change it for, performance issues, or because you need it to be structured in a different way to pull the data you need easier, keep those in your brain too, because again, those are going to be really great stories to tell in interviews. Okay, that's it from me. I'm going to bounce, but I'm always here for you if any of you have questions or need anything from me. I'll be around. Good luck with the week 2. Week 2.
Yeah.
Bye, friends.
See you, Stacy. All right, now I think next on the agenda is our learning module. Is it code reviews this week?
Yeah.
All right. In that case, Alex, take it away.
Where's the share screen? There it is. You guys see my screen? Or I'm good.
Good.
So we're talking about code reviews this week, which is something that you guys all kind of experienced. And I don't know, do you guys have any other kind of previous experience to code reviewing before this week? Or is it kind of brand new to everyone?
Brand new.
Brand new. That's good. And you guys did a great job. So it's just like you're already on a good path. So the things we're covering is, what is a code review? What is the code review cycle? What makes an actual good or great code review? How can you actually help in your own code review? Because sometimes you can just throw your own code up and kind of just be like, go, other developers, help me. But then, as we'll see, a lot of times you actually can kind of participate in your own code review as well. And then how can you review other people's code, and then kind of exploring how we do code reviewing in GitHub in general. So kind of what is a code review is that it's a conversation about a set of changes in your code. And then it is kind of a place where people can share knowledge. A lot of times almost all times in any kind of coding environment, someone's going to know something more about what you're doing than you do. And so they can kind of step in and be like, hey, actually, this is a more performant way to do this. And you're like, oh my God, thanks. Kind of, similar to what happened to you guys this week with Tim. Part of a code review is that it's a collaboration. You share your work, you ask questions. So this kind of comes back to how can you help yourself in a code review? It's totally appropriate to put up a PR and then highlight your own piece of code and be like, I'm not sure this is what I'm like this is the correct way to do it. So asking questions on your own code review so people can help you out is a great place to be. Code reviews, again, it's code reviewing is a learning experience for the entire team. I mean, again, people are going to have knowledge about certain things, and some people are not going to have knowledge about certain things, and they're going to come up with their own way. And it just creates a whole kind of conversation on every single PR about, what is the best way to move forward as a team and not just as an individual developer. And then code reviewing decentralizes the knowledge. So it spreads out. Everyone gets to look at your code. Everyone gets to understand it. Everyone gets to ask questions about it. So by the end, everyone who's interacted with UPR should 100% understand what's going on. And then in the future, if they end up having to adjust your code, they're already in the know because they were part of that journey of getting that code reviewed. So this is kind of just the basic code review cycle. So you open a pull request, you ask for feedback or you receive feedback. If you do get feedback, then you got to make changes, and then it kind of resets, and it's kind of this infinite loop until everyone's happy and it gets approved, and then you merge it, which is what you guys saw this week. What makes a great code review? An important thing is there's a lot of automation in coding that you'll run into, stuff like prettier ESLint, type checkers if you're doing something like TypeScript and JavaScript. All of these things should be automatic. So like, hey, you're missing a semicolon. That's not a very helpful like code review, because that should just be happening kind of automatic. So you can, for the most part, leave that stuff out because most of the time it won't even exist. But it is appropriate if there's something like drastically wrong. Like if like the tabbing or spacing is just so wacky in the PR that it's even hard to read, that's when you can be like, hey, can you actually, before we review this, can you go in and fix all that, please? But typically, like I said, in most environments that you work in, all like stuff like semicolons and spacing and tabs and is just automatic. It's just you save your file and it's done, which is really nice. A big part of code reviewing is actually testing it. This is a tough part because sometimes you'll do 20 code reviews in a day, and pulling down 20 branches and stuff can be a lot, but it is very helpful, especially if you're kind of confused about the code. Sometimes it's very easy to just look at a PR on GitHub and be like, I totally get what's happening. I'm totally familiar with this part of the application. I don't need to pull it down. This is going to work. And like, you also, part of code reviewing is that you're putting faith in your other developers that when they open the PR, they are kind of making a promise that it's working, right? No one puts up a PR and it's completely broken, because that's crazy. So part of being in a collaborative environment is that when someone opens up a PR, it's saying, hey, I promise that the work I'm putting up is working. It may not be correct to our standards or something, and we may need to adjust it, but it is working. So a lot of times you can just read the code and get your approvals, but then other times when you're like, I have no idea what's going on, totally pull it down, test it, and sometimes there is even functionality you're like, oh, I don't like, what's going to happen if I do this? Like I'm going to click this button, and it's like, oh, that's not what I expected at all, kind of stuff. So it is very important to get locally testing done. And then again, in a bigger organization, there'll also be QA testers in your who, this is literally part of their job, is that they pull down your code and they test it and they yell at you. Another part of a good code review is the code going to be understandable even a month from now? Because sometimes when you write code, it makes total sense at the moment, and then you go back to it a month later to make some alterations, and you're just like, what the heck who wrote this? So then you look at the Git play and you're like, oh God, it was me. So a big part of that, and that's again a great thing, and something that I do a lot in my own work, is that I'll ask people to change function names, change variable names, because it's like, hey, like in this context, I understand that your function called completed like makes sense, but like, what is it completing? Like, you know, if I hand this off to a junior developer, are they going to understand what's completed? Like, could you like fill out a full function name of what are you completing? So your code wants to kind of, you want to make sure your code is very kind of naturally readable. So, you know, no one letter variables and, you know, no one letter functions, and, you know, make sure they fully make sense. A big part of code reviewing is praise. It's totally appropriate inside of code reviews to just say, hey, good job. Or like, you know, highlight a piece of code and be like, oh my God, this is so great. Like, I'm going to use this in my next PR kind of thing. Cause it's like, I didn't even know that was possible. So that stuff is really good, especially with just like building confidence. It's nice to get praise. It's nice to praise people. And, you know, if you don't praise people who praise you, then the loop doesn't continue. So default to approval. This is just, again, kind of the trust thing where you may put a comment on a code review and be like, hey, you know, this variable name doesn't make a lot of sense. Could you fix it? It's still totally appropriate to approve the PR at that point, and you just have to put faith that the person is going to go back and fix that before they hit the merge button. And a reason to do this is that when you get into larger organizations with, you know, 30 developers, 40 developers, you know, some companies 200 developers, you just don't have the time to wait for code reviews to come in, make all the changes, then re-ask for those code reviews again, because it takes a lot of time. So, you know, kind of a default is like, as long as there's nothing really glaring and you're like, hey, could you just make these small adjustments? It's totally okay just to go ahead and approve that PR. And again, you're just trusting that that developer who's in charge is going to make those changes before they submit it. Again, what goes along with the praise, the be kind and empathetic. Coding's hard. It crushes people's souls sometimes. So, you know, just being nice to other developers is a big part. And you'll see that when you get kind of into the field, is that, you know, people have bad days, you know, people have good days, and it's like, it's tough. And PRs can, you know, a bad PR, because I mean, it happens to everyone. You'll submit a PR and be like, this is going to be great. I did a great job in this. And you just get torn to shreds by, you know, 6 senior developers who are just like, why did we even hire you kind of attitude, because it's so bad. And it's just like, that's just not a healthy way. It's a great way to have big turnover at your company, which happens. And so just being kind and empathetic and be like, you know, hey, this is not a super great way to do this. Can we work together to, you know, kind of come up with a better solution, as opposed to this code sucks, do better kind of thing. And then again, in our next section, we'll be talking about, you know, how can you help people review your own code. And this, again, creates this loop of, you know, a good code review is that a lot of times it starts with the person who put up the PR. You can kind of review your code yourself right in that PR to help people understand what's going on. And then as a PR owner, you're responsible for answering questions. So if developers say, hey, I don't really understand what's happening on this line of code, your code isn't going to get better, or is it going to get reviewed any better if you don't also participate in that and be like, hey, X, Y, and Z does this, this, and this. And people will be like, oh, cool, now I understand. Or, oh, hey, could you just make a couple adjustments then so it's easier to understand? And then it's just take your time. It's not a race. You'll find out in bigger companies that sometimes it's totally appropriate to have a PR open for a week because it's a big discussion. Like, you don't need to like submit your code and then get it done that day and hope it gets merged. Like, it's just not a realistic thing. Sometimes I've sat on a PR for a month because it was just a big chunk of work that opened up a gigantic discussion. So again, coding is not a race. Any questions before I keep going? Cool. So again, trying out local features. This is 100% the best way to understand a PR. Again, it's a very time constraining thing, but I definitely recommend it. And for our group, in our case, I would always, when you guys are reviewing a PR, I would always pull it down and test it. Again, this gives confidence, especially when it's like, you know, if your other peers are like, hey, I pulled it down, I ran it, it's great, you know, approve, like that's just like a total confidence of like, it's working kind of deal. Again, testing locally helps you find things that you're not going to get from just reading the code. I mean, a lot of times code is so simple, like the 2 PRs we just had, that sometimes you don't need to test it, but other times, yeah, you may even think it's so simple, but then when you load it down, you're just like, oh God, like these are so much more complicated than I thought. And then a big part of locally testing is that you'll see side effects. So you may read the code and be like, all right, we just built a button and it puts data in the database. But it, like, if you just read that code and don't know the context and then you run it locally, it's like, oh, but when we add stuff to the database, it affects this other part of the app that the original PR author didn't see. And so now we've got a bug. And so it's like, so we caught a bug before the PR happened, so we can just fix it right there to make sure. And then again, it's kind of the resist the temptation. I know I've kind of bounced back and forth on this on saying like sometimes it is appropriate just to read the code, but really it is always almost better to just pull it down and test it locally. Again, in our case, our React application is very fast, so it only takes like a second to pull down the PR and a second to get it running. So I definitely recommend it. And then part of a PR, and this goes back to, you know, how can you have a better PR and better code reviewing, is that you include instructions on how to run your code. A lot of times it's really simple. Again, with our stories, they're very cut and dry right now of like, we made a button, it puts data into the database, it shows up on the screen. You don't need a ton of instructions for that. But, you know, as we further go along, kind of in your PR descriptions, you're going to start having more complicated interactions where people reading your code can't just out of the gate understand what's going to happen. And so that's, you know, adding instructions of, hey, when you open the app, go to this page, click this button, this is what's supposed to happen, kind of thing. You know, add pictures, add videos, all of that is super helpful. And then again, ask questions. It's the biggest thing. It's the biggest thing to learn in coding as junior developers, as you know, mid developers, as senior developers, as you know, architects, is that every single person asks questions. You know, I've been doing web development for 10 years. I still ask for help on merge conflicts in my job because sometimes they're just super hard, and it's just like, it doesn't matter how long you've been doing it. Sometimes you just need help.
Or just another set of eyes. Sometimes you've been looking at something too long.
Yeah, sometimes when you're just like working on something for an entire week, you just get so lost that it's like, and then like 2 seconds of another person looking at it and your solution solved is just like a half time. So how can you help other people review your code? Again, it's a meaningful PR description, so make sure you're explaining exactly what you did. A lot of times you'll see people just straight up take the ticket that you received, like your issue ticket, and you just paste that into your description because that does a pretty good job of explaining. But if there's more context you want to give, obviously add that. Meaningful commit messages is a big thing. People look at that, so don't put silly commit messages. I'm definitely guilty of that. So it's, you know, write exactly what you did in the commit message, make it very plain and clear. I mean, and again, a lot of what you're doing, you're going to have to come back to, because that's a big part of coding, is a lot of times code that you edit, people kind of just say you're in charge of it now. So if something 6 months from now comes back, they'll be like, look at the git blame and be like, this is Alex's thing. And so you have to go back and read your own commit messages. And if they're terrible, like, that's on you. That's, you know, it's you hurting you. So self-review your code. And this is something that I do all the time, is that I put a PR up, and before I even ask for other people, I do a code review myself. Because a lot of times when you just get a different context of from your local environment to your to GitHub, the code just sometimes reads differently, and you kind of look at it. And again, this is a great time when you can ask questions to the group right inside your PR and be like, hey, I wrote, you know, line 6 through 10, I wrote, I'm not feeling super great about them. Is there a better way to do this? And, you know, you'll get 15 responses right away of like, I think this, I think this, I think this. And then just kind of as a group, you just decide which is the best way going forward, and you make the change. And then again, going to more, you know, meaningful PR descriptions, there's a bunch of tools that are listed right here, and there's 1,000 more to help take screenshots, to help take video, kind of any of that really just helps the whole PR process. Because when you just kind of put up a PR with, a minimal description and no pictures or anything, and you say go, it's just not going to be a great experience for everyone. Okay, so exploring GitHub. So there's a couple ways that, there's a lot of ways to do code reviews, but the big one that you'll see in most cases is there's a file change tab in the PRs, and that actually shows what code has changed. But when you first go to that tab, it kind of just dumps all the code changes on the page. And in our case, we didn't have a ton of code changes, so that's not that big of a deal. But later, as we get into the project, and then as you get into your careers, you'll get times where instead of 3 files changed, you'll hit a PR that's got 75 files changed, which is in most cases a nightmare, just like everyone's nightmare. And usually the first comment you'll see on a PR that's got 75 files changes, hey, is there any way to break this up so it's not 75 files? And that's just something, again, about, good code reviewing and how can you help get your PRs reviewed better is being mindful of stuff like that. It's totally appropriate, even if you're on a single ticket, to actually open up 2 PRs, because if the work is big enough, it's like, hey, it's better if I just split this up and make 2 reviews go a little quicker versus like 1 giant review. Because if you ask 4 developers to go through 75 files, you're first of all going to make 4 enemies at work. And then, and it just takes a long time. And then if you have to make changes, then everyone has to reread your 75 files. So that's just something to think about. But there are ways to kind of cut down on that. There's under the changes to commit, you can actually individually see each commit. So you can review code by commit versus by file, and then it just kind of breaks it down, and then you can just navigate with next to each commit. And so that can sometimes be a cleaner way to handle that. Again, this is kind of like how you want to do it. You can either with the review changes button, you can either just snap review the whole file and add comments for the whole file. You can approve the entire PR, or you can GitHub lets you individually go to each file and say, hey, you know what, I approve this file, this file, this file. Hey, this file needs some work, here are my comments on it. So you can kind of get a little more diverse. You can also do inline commenting, where you just highlight an exact line of code and they're just like, hey, can we update the variable name on line 6, please? And it's just right there, and it's really nice. And so again, part of code reviewing is just questioning and answering and just kind of sharing.
This one, I believe, is meant to be an exercise for like right now, for people to talk about how it went last week. Yeah.
So, I guess kind of opening up to the floor, how did you guys think last week went?
First of all, like snaps for Alex for that presentation. Thank you very much. That was all very in line with my experience of code reviews. Thank you so much for doing that. But yeah, let's open it up. Anyone want to share your experience doing code reviews, either in the past or just this last week?
I guess I'll start, since I caused the most chaos, I think, from my code reviews. Yeah, it was a really interesting experience. I wasn't sure. Yeah, I'm not even necessarily sure what I'm gonna say here, but I shared like just some higher level thoughts that like seem like they might be just like helpful. But it kind of like ended up spiraling a little bit, seemed like, which was kind of an interesting experience, I guess. But yeah, I think the big tip that I got out of this little presentation was that you can leave comments and still like approve the code review. I think that's like a really helpful tip for like just little ticky-tack things. Yeah, overall, I think it was a good learning experience.
It's an excellent point there. Sorry, go ahead, Rebecca.
I was just gonna like add on to that like, I think Shireen and I were talking about it yesterday, and we also like learned about like sticking to the ticket and, you know, like making sure that like, because we saw Tim's idea and we were like, this is a great idea. Like, let's do this. But, you know, it was Friday afternoon and like we needed something to demo today and we weren't really in a position to like we just like weren't set up to like go that far right now. And so I feel like we learned a lesson about like having conversations, but not necessarily like, you know, straying from the ticket, like hearing everything and like making plans with your team for the future, but like, you know, also making sure like the ticket is done, because we kind of like we got excited and we like kind of strayed from our objective. So yeah, it was a good lesson in like taking feedback and being like, oh yeah, like we have to do that in the future and not trying to like rush to make changes.
That's a great takeaway as well. Yeah, communication at all stages, super important, not just in that like review at the end there. Code review is really interesting professionally because, you know, and I think a point that I wanted to really hammer on that Alex made really well too is just that like it can be very tempting to just +2 stuff, especially when it's like, I know the person who did this, I work with them every day, and they probably have a handle on it. Like at the end of the day, you kind of, when you put your +2 or your, sorry, I use a different code review system. When you put your, you know, merge approve on something, you're sharing responsibility a little bit for the quality of that code. And so like, especially in organizations where like prod goes down, it's a bad time for everybody. You know, you want to be really like you're not doing anyone a favor necessarily by not testing that or not like giving it a thorough read through at a bare minimum. So yeah, the temptation to just looks good to me is one that I would caution against. But another really good point that I think that Tim touched on that I want to also go back to is the idea, the sort of the big picture notion of this is kind of like, I think when you're a junior dev, it's easier to give code reviews that are about like missing semicolons and like syntax stuff. But you know, as you get to be senior developers, you'll find, I think, that like it'll be like, okay, why are we writing this way, or why are we writing this chunk of code at all, or like maybe this could be a separate library or stuff like that. You get a little bit more strategic about it. And then when you get to be a staff engineer, the conversations turn to be like, okay, why are we bothering to implement this entire like thing? Could we just buy something or do something off the shelf? Or yeah, that tends to be the progression I've found, at least in back end. But anywho, anyone else have any thoughts they'd like to share about code review?
I just was going to say that I really see now how important it is to make mini commits throughout the process, so that you have something, so that you can go back to a different snapshot of time with your code. They said that in my boot camp, and I believed them, but now I'm really getting to see how important it is in real life.
Yeah, there's never there's never too many commits ever. Yeah. I mean, certainly people might call you out and be like, why do you have 85 commits on this one file change? Like, chill out. But for the most part, because again, part of the power of Git is that it can rewind time for you, and to help you fix mistakes, or to help you kind of roll back the scope, because that was the issue you guys ran into, is you kind of went over scope of what your story, because you had completed it on Friday, but then they're like, oh my God, this new idea is great, let's try this. And it's just like, and that, I promise you, I've done that a million times. Scott's done it a bunch. Andy's done it, where it's just like, you read a ticket, you do it, and you're like, but I could make it better. It's like, you don't have to make it better. They asked you to do this one thing, just do it, kind of thing. And then, and for all you know, they have a plan to make it better next week. And it, like, if you do that all work before it, then it messes up, you know, your manager schedules and stuff for you. So it's just like, kind of, you know, I know it's hard, and I know it's very tempting to kind of go over scope on stuff, but it's a very important skill to learn, is to kind of just stick to the plan in software development. So you guys, I think you guys had a great learning experience this week. And then again, you know, commit a lot. You know, I always have a rule for myself that if I'm going to stand up from my computer, I always commit my work, because if you stand up, walk away, and then you lose power, then, and you don't have it committed, you know, a lot of times you'll lose all that work. And I promise you, every single person has either lost work or you will lose work as a software developer. It's going to happen. You know, it's a rite of passage for your computer to just explode and catch on fire as a software developer, and you just lose like 2 weeks of work. Like, it's going to happen to you. So the safest thing to do is, if the second you're getting up from your computer, make sure everything's saved, make sure everything's committed, make sure everything's pushed up to the repo. So when your computer does explode, it doesn't matter.
It doesn't even have to be like, you know, force majeure computer explosion stuff. You could just be like getting too clever by half with Git. And I've done this where it's just like, oh yeah, no, I'm just gonna rebase onto master, and then I eventually, rebase onto main, and I just like lose all the changes that I did because I mess up like one of the keystrokes somewhere in the process. It's just like, oh no, that's not in a commit anywhere.
Cool.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think working with a partner and not doing stuff on my own now, it's like now, like I felt like Rebecca and I were really good about holding each other accountable in terms of like, after we were done doing something, we both were like, okay, did you commit? Let's commit it. Let's push it. It was like we had that accountability, I felt like, and it was nice. So
For sure, definitely, that's a huge part of this whole experience. Andy, if you don't mind, I think now's a great time for us to assign some issues. We're doing 3 and 4 this week, so
Yeah,
getting into some fun stuff.
let's do it. Okay. You should see my screen now. All right, so I've got issue 3 up, so we can start to walk through the acceptance criteria on issue 3. As a user, I want to set up a new shopping list so I can start tracking purchased items. Okay, so a shopping list will consist of a set of items associated to a user by a token. Creating a new list consists of the following sequence. 1, generate a new unique token. 2, save the token to local storage. And 3, show the user the list view. And we have a script that will help us out with this. So a script called get token in the shopping list utils package should be used to generate the token. You can open this link to find some more info on using that node package. Let's see. And here's the import statement that you'll use to get access to that package in your code. Let's see. Okay, acceptance criteria. We need to add that package as a dependency to the project. For users who do not already have a token or a list, a button or link exists on the home screen that allows them to create a new list, which, let's see, which is set up a new shopping list. So that is, yeah, a button exists to create a new list. Clicking that button generates the token and saves it to local storage. Once it's been created, then the user can move into the list view and see their list. Users who do have a token already saved in local storage should just be shown the list. There is a wireframe. Zoom's blocking me from seeing it. Okay, so I think the note here, let me switch back really quick, is that it's good to look at this wireframe, but to remember that the create a new list button is the scope of this ticket and the rest will come later. And that's what this little sticky note is for another chunk of functionality here. Let's see. Yeah, there will be future stories to add other features. And for this story, sufficient just to have the create list button. And it's noting, so this sounds like kind of an optional piece. You are not required to save the token to Firestore, but you may elect to do so. You might think that that is going to be a useful piece of information to have in the database, as well as in local storage. Any questions on this one? Just, is this going to be a new, like, a view in like the navigation? I just want to make sure I understand. Like the new list button could be on like the page where we have like the add item button now, or it could be like on a new like future homepage.
this looks like a homepage to me, but Scott, since you've
seen this project before. What is your take?
Yeah, generally speaking, the way we do this is it ends up on the home page. Like the home page looks like this mock-up right here. I don't know to what extent this is like part of the AC for this ticket though. Let's see here. I think a lot of this functionality, let's see here, a button or link exists on the home screen that allows them to create a new list. Yeah. And then once the token has been created and saved, the user is redirected to the list view, which is like a separate page. That's generally how it ends up looking. These are two separate like views. I don't have a lot of context on like what that means for JavaScript, but I've seen this in like its full functional glory, and it tends to be like, yeah, two separate pages.
Other questions or comments? Okay, can move on to issue 4. As a user, I want to add a new item to my shopping list so I can start recording purchases. So a shopping list item consists of the following data points: the name of the item, how soon you are likely to buy it again, and there are 3 options there: soon, kind of soon, and not soon, and the last purchase date. So acceptance criteria: the user should see a form that allows them to enter the name of the item and select how soon they anticipate needing to buy it again from those 3 options. When they submit the form, the item should be saved to the database associated with their token. Along with the item name, an integer corresponding to the estimated number of days until next purchase is saved. So we have 3 options: 7 corresponds with soon, 14 for kind of soon, and 30 for not soon. Initially, the last purchase date should be set to null, i.e. you can create an item without purchasing it. Item name should be displayed as a simple unordered list on the list view, which you have already, after they're added. Some notes about scope. We have a couple of wireframes. Let's start with this one here, which is the add item wireframe. So fairly simple. Here's your little navigation at the bottom. So this will go on that view that you've already created. Item name, and then the radio buttons to select. And then these stickies are giving you some notes that read to me like several of them are kind of related to like accessibility, semantic HTML. So we want to have a label for our inputs. And then interestingly, a few more pieces of what look like AC. So just something to take note that, like, for example, one of these is going to be the default selection. Yeah, another note about grouping radio buttons with a field set element. That's another accessibility item. And then we want to indicate to the well, let's see. I don't think that's part of this acceptance criteria. So we can probably, sorry, I started, yeah, we can probably disregard a lot of those notes. Says has notes related to accessibility, but those things aren't in acceptance criteria. So how do you interpret that, Scott and Alex? Like, we can disregard those for now, just something to keep in mind?
No, I would say those are just, you know, web standards. So
Okay.
when you make an input form, you need to have a label, you know.
Sure.
And that's just part of, again, kind of part of the PR process, part of being a developer, is that if you forget a label for your input, you know, someone should call you out on it and be like, hey, for accessibility reasons. So kind of there's a difference between an acceptance criteria, which is typically an acceptance criteria is what the business is looking to accomplish. But most of the time the business doesn't understand how a form actually is built on the web. And so that's where you as a developer and your knowledge comes in, and you're responsible for making sure that you have labels on your inputs and, you know, things are properly accessible. So I you know, again, the acceptance criteria is what the business wants, and then these notes right here are what we as developers want to see. So it's kind of like a little bit of a hidden acceptance criteria, which is kind of like, something you're going to have to get used to.
If you look at the two ACs under the wireframes, I think they indicate that it's like, these are things that you should be aware of, but like look at them, but don't try and implement all this stuff. And like getting all those features in is something we're going to do in the future. But for this one, it's sufficient just to get a list of items displaying.
So I would guess like this feedback, give feedback to the user. I'm guessing that is one that you could disregard for now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, and then the other wireframe is what the list will look like eventually, like after you've added some items to it.
Mm-hmm. And again, this is like, there's a lot going on this one right now. We just want you to like show the items. Here, like the links to interact with them, not things we have to worry about.
No, very similar to what our story one was, where they just dumped the ID onto the page. You're just going to do the same thing here, but you're just going to dump more of that information, and you don't have to make it pretty or wordy or anything.
Exactly.
Questions on this one?
All right, what are our groups for this week?
I guess, does anybody have an issue 3 or 4 that they're like excited by and want to be on?
I'm sorry, what are the groups of 2?
I was wondering if we should determine that maybe if there was
no,
there's a list.
Oh, gotcha.
I'm with,
I do not have it handy.
I'm with Tim this week, and I guess Shireen will be with Sarani.
Emily.
Yeah,
okay, so
cool. Anyone have a strong preference for something you really want to work on?
Okay,
like
well,
pretty similar.
Tim is first on my screen, so I'll say Tim and Rebecca, you guys got 3, and then Shireen and Emily will have issue 4. Let's see. Rebecca, are you Rebecca Beard? Okay. Let's see if Emily is. She is in there now.
Yeah.
And Andrew did say that he already confirmed that Emily should be good for our Sunday meeting, so I don't think we have to.
Oh, cool.
Good. Nice.
Gotcha. I think she had a conflict today, but we'll keep this slot then.
Yeah, it was just today, but I think he said that she was good to go going forward.
Great. Awesome. And this week I will schedule office hours, and I'll get in touch with all y'all about getting that put together. But that'll be me this week. So I'm sorry about that, but hopefully we'll be able to discuss some things that are of interest to you folks. That's what I try to do, because I'm a little bit less savvy with front end design, but I can tell you some tales from the development trenches. I've been in them for a while now.
Tim and Rebecca, do y'all want to try to still do our Monday meetup as a whole, like all 4 of us? And I can ask Emily what time's good for her, and then break off from there after we kind of look at issue 3 and 4 again together. And then, did y'all like doing that Monday?
Yeah, I think that was a nice thing.
That's a super cool idea. I'm glad you folks are doing that. And you're going to notice, I think, over issues 3 and 4 and 5 and 6, the next 2 weeks in particular, we're going to start to see some merge conflicts. It's going to be scary at first, because it's tricky to, like, we don't give you easy ones, but you're starting to work on some of the same code just across different groups. And so coordination on stuff like that, like across the 2 groups, and figuring out like which code is supposed to be in which place on the main branch, that's super essential, and that's a skill we really want you to develop. So that's built into the process. It is intentional and it is solvable. So I'm sure you're gonna get there. You're gonna be just fine. But do reach out to each other and reach out to us if you have questions about that stuff as well. And as always, we're here for you on Slack. We're here for code reviews, async anytime. Thank you very much for joining us this week. Week 2 is going to be a blast, and I'm looking forward to welcoming Emily into the cohort as well. So hopefully when she watches this recording, she'll understand that we have a warm welcome on the way.
Cool, perfect timing.
Awesome. All right. Well, thanks everybody. Have a great week. We'll see you out there.